The recent summit in Anchorage, Alaska, between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin has captivated the world's attention, not only for its high-stakes diplomacy, but for the glaring absence of resolution after hours of negotiation. The air was thick with anticipation as both leaders arrived at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, met on a red carpet rolled out beneath the cold Alaskan sky, and exchanged pleasantries that belied the deep tensions underlying their talks. Yet, as the cameras flashed and jets roared overhead in a symbolic show of American might, the summit concluded with little more than optimistic soundbites and a looming sense of uncertainty for Ukraine and its future. What unfolded behind closed doors was a revealing glimpse into the harsh realities of modern geopolitics. Putin arrived with a well-known set of demands: formal control over the contested eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, and a freeze of military lines in southern Ukraine. These demands, shaped by years of conflict and shifting front lines, reflect Moscow's desire to cement its influence and redraw regional boundaries. Trump, meanwhile, surprised many by abandoning his earlier calls for an immediate ceasefire. Instead, he pivoted to the idea of a broader agreement, one that might include security guarantees for Ukraine, but whose details remain as elusive as peace itself. The press conference that followed was emblematic of the summit's ambiguity. Trump declared great progress, lauding the productivity of his meeting with Putin, but was quick to admit that a deal had not been reached. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there, he asserted, yet offered no specifics. The two leaders offered praise for each other, with Putin endorsing Trump's belief that the war could have been avoided entirely had Trump been in office in 2020. But as the questions from reporters grew more insistent, the answers became scarcer. The press conference ended abruptly, leaving the world to speculate about what, if anything, had actually been settled. Putin, speaking through an interpreter, described Trump's efforts as precious and spoke of an understanding reached between the two. But the Russian leader remained firm on his core demands, reiterating that the root causes of the conflict must be addressed. For the Kremlin, these include Ukraine's renunciation of NATO aspirations and the ambiguous call for denazification, a term often interpreted as a demand for regime change in Kyiv. Putin's message to Europe was equally pointed. Don't sabotage the process with backroom deals or unnecessary interference. For Ukraine, the outcome of the Anchorage summit was troubling. President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was notably absent from the Alaska talks, now faces the daunting prospect of negotiating with both Trump and Putin, with the fate of his country hanging in the balance. Trump made clear in a subsequent interview that the next steps rest with Zelensky. Now it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done, and I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit. They're going to set up a meeting now between President Zelensky and President Putin and myself, I guess. As the world digests the lack of tangible progress, attention shifts to Washington, D.C., where Zelensky will soon arrive for the next round of talks. He will be flanked by a coalition of European leaders: Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Finland, and the European Commission, who have pledged their support and insist that Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be safeguarded. For these leaders, continued sanctions against Russia remain paramount, and any peace agreement must include robust security guarantees for Kyiv. European officials have voiced their concerns in no uncertain terms. They warn against territorial concessions that would legitimize Russian control over occupied regions. The preference, they say, is for a trilateral framework that brings Ukraine, Russia, and the United States to the table, ensuring that no major decisions are made without Ukrainian consent. The message from Brussels and Berlin is clear. The search for peace must not come at the expense of principle or precedent. Meanwhile, the summit in Anchorage has left behind more than just diplomatic uncertainty. In a somewhat comic twist, a packet of logistical details, including gift lists and schedules, was reportedly left in a hotel printer, a minor scandal that underscores the hurried and improvised nature of the event. For observers, this oddity serves as a metaphor for the summit itself, a high-profile affair marked by spectacle but short on substance. The symbolism of the meeting cannot be ignored. Trump's warm greeting of Putin, the shared limousine ride, and the friendly banter contrasted sharply with the frosty relations both leaders have had with Ukraine's Zelensky. The optics of American and Russian leaders standing shoulder to shoulder on US soil, even as Ukrainian cities remain under threat, have sparked debate in Washington. Critics, including Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, accused Trump of granting Putin legitimacy on the global stage while gaining little in return. For them, the summit was less about diplomacy and more about political theatre. Yet, despite the disappointment, the Anchorage summit has set the stage for a new phase in the search for peace. The shift away from an immediate ceasefire signals a recognition that the issues at stake are too complex for quick fixes. Control of territory, security arrangements, and the future of Ukraine's alliances are all on the table, each fraught with risk and opportunity. The challenge now is to translate broad aspirations into concrete agreements that can end the violence and lay the foundation for lasting stability. As Zelensky prepares to travel to Washington, the stakes could not be higher. His upcoming meetings will be decisive, not just for Ukraine, but for the wider European order. European leaders are expected to stand firmly at his side, ensuring that Ukraine is not sidelined in negotiations that affect its very existence. The push for NATO-style security guarantees is gaining momentum, though Putin has indicated he might accept such guarantees only if Russia's concerns are addressed. For ordinary Ukrainians, the outcome remains uncertain. The hope for a just peace is tempered by the realities of war and the unpredictability of global politics. The voices of those living in Donetsk, Luhansk, and the embattled South are often lost in the grand narratives of summits and press conferences. Their future depends on the ability of leaders to find common ground, resist the temptation of easy compromises, and uphold the principles of sovereignty and self-determination. In the days ahead, the world will be watching Washington. The path to peace may be long and fraught with obstacles, but the conversations that began in Anchorage have set the tone for what comes next. Whether Trump's grand deal can deliver more than symbols and sound bites remains to be seen. For now, the only certainty is that the search for answers and for lasting peace in Ukraine continues.